All right, so Amazon is no longer considering New York, and we know that, right? And there's the few politicians that kind of help push that project out of New York, and people were asking what will happen to the other 25,000 people that were promised jobs. Amazon wanted to have an HQ2, and they split it over two locations: New York City, which would have 25,000, and DC would have 25,000. Nashville got a 5,000 person hub site, right? So the Nashville part was unexpected, and the split was unexpected of the two. Instead of having 50,000, it was split over into two. And the biggest shock was the fact that New York basically said no. A lot of the loudest vocal folks said no. And, I did a video prior to this that I'm not going to post. Sometimes I do videos and I get a little bit rough. I was watching videos talking about the whole Amazon cancel in New York, and I was listening to some of the folks who were the people, they were politicians who kind of said they didn't want it. And I'm like, you just don't understand business. You don't understand how it all works or how this whole thing is going to be set up, or none of that. And all the other side businesses that get created, and the tons of restaurants and service workers that will be getting jobs, and new businesses opening, satellite companies, all of that. And the fact that this is not money that has to be spent, $3 billion that New York was offering didn't have to be spent right away or given to them right away. It's basically a tax break, and it would happen over a certain course of time once Amazon proved that they provided a certain number of jobs. That's basically the situation. Well, Amazon said that they were not going to open up another HQ2 search, which it doesn't make sense to do that. They've already got all the information that they need. There are only certain key cities that make good sense to begin with. And to be honest with you, Amazon has 17 locations where they have office sites throughout the country. So there's no point in them really going and doing anything else. They can basically have two headquarters, one in DC and then one here in Seattle. However, I think that, I mentioned in a video that Amazon pretty much has to come home. And that's what they're doing. Seattle is a problem for Amazon because it basically had a few people that complained, but they appreciated Amazon at the same token. They complained that housing costs are high, the infrastructure is getting hard pressed, and we don't have enough infrastructure yet, which is not Amazon's fault, but that there are so many issues that Amazon could help. And I agree with that. But Seattle went about it the wrong way too, by putting on the head tax and a bunch of other stuff, and did not even consider Amazon. Well, that doesn't really work very well. Amazon also got a good shaking when they went to New York that says, you know what, you're a big company, but we have much more powerful people than you do. And instead of sitting there and trying to argue with folks, and it was a really good deal. Now, I don't agree with how Amazon did the whole process of the whole bidding thing, but the deal that New York would have got was actually a pretty good deal. If you look at it on paper, and that's what I go by. I don't go by what I think or what sounds good. I go by what's on paper, and it looks really, really good. It was a better deal. Amazon could have got more money had they chosen a different location than they did New York. And it wasn't like a check was going to be written to Amazon. Anyway, so Amazon decided to basically sprinkle that 25,000 over time to all these other different sites. So basically build up their existing locations. Why? Well, they already know what they're going to get themselves into. It's a safe bet. They already know what they're going to get themselves into. They don't have to worry about anything. And they can basically just kind of put people in strategic locations and just work with what they have. Makes sense. However, there's Bellevue. Now, I talk about Bellevue when I say it's kind of hoity-toity, and it is, but not all of Bellevue is. Bellevue is where Amazon got started. Jeff Bezos started in his garage. The house that he actually started it in, he was renting. That house is for sale now, and it's going to go for over $1 million. At the time, it was not worth much of anything. And it's going to be for sale. He quickly moved Amazon. It was only there for a few months to Seattle, and it was actually in Belltown, I believe. So, and then he later expanded and went to the Denny Triangle area, which is where it still is today. But nonetheless, he has went back to Bellevue and he's focused on Bellevue. Now, Bellevue is interesting because Bellevue used to have a lot of big companies, and they still do. Microsoft has a presence there, Expedia, a lot of different companies. And so Expedia, I believe, left and they went to Seattle, but they still have a building there. And there's a lot of tenants in this building. It's a pretty big building. Well, Amazon moved in and brought in 2,000 workers to this building. It's a beautiful glass building. If you go to Bellevue again, and the thumbnail shows you, it's a city of under 200,000 people. I think it has like 100 and I don't know exact, but it's smaller than Tacoma. But if you look at the skyline, it looks like you're in a big city, right? The city has a lot of amenities. For all the hoity-toityness, it has a lot of amenities. A lot. Now, there's a lot that it's lacking, right? So a lot of the cultural aspects that's lacking. Not a lot of museums, not a lot of theaters, theater districts, for plays and stuff like that. But it does have a lot of big jobs. It's becoming a tech hub on its own. So you have Amazon that has looked at the city as well as Facebook. So it's becoming a hotbed. So they put their 2,000 workers in Expedia. And there is another building that Amazon is wanting to buy. And it's called Corporate Plaza, which is right there in downtown Bellevue. It's a 10-story building. And what they want to do is buy this building so they can put 8,000 people in it. Now, they put down a pretty hefty amount of money to buy the building. Now, the Expedia building, they lease. This particular building that is available, they want to buy the building. And they're going to put 8,000 workers there. Now, if you add that up, that's 10,000 workers that they're wanting to put right there in Bellevue. Okay. Now, these two buildings already exist. So it's not like they have to really do anything. The one Expedia building, they want to take that whole entire building over once those leases expire for the other tenants. So they want to slowly, Amazon now doesn't want to take a little piece of a building. They want the whole thing. So therefore, they don't have to wait to grow or anything. They just do what they need to do. So the Expedia building, once they take all of that, don't know how many they can fit in there, but the space they have currently is at 2,000. The other building that they want to buy, which is right next to the Bellevue Transit Center, like right across the street is the Bellevue Transit Center, is going to hold 8,000 people. Now, this is important because Bellevue is going to be the next city to get light rail service. And the light rail, right now, they're tunneling through. They show you, Sound Transit shows you Mercer Island and the tracks that they're laying, and they're showing the tunnels that they've dug for the subway in Bellevue, and it's going to go right there by the transit station. So you can literally hop on the light rail train and get to Redmond, eventually once they build it out to Redmond, which is the headquarters for Microsoft. Eventually, you're going to be able to go to Issaquah and all these other places. You're going to be able to go all the way into downtown Seattle. And eventually, once they finish everything, you're going to be able to go all the way down to Tacoma, all the way up to Everett. So doesn't matter where you work or live in this area, technically, you could get to any of these places. But Bellevue is interesting because this line is going to be completed in the next few years. We're talking 5 years, I think. I don't know exactly. But I'll put it in the description box. I forget offhand because I have all these numbers in my head. But basically, the East Link line is being worked on right now. And so they're building the maintenance and operations facility. They've already got all the trains in order, like they're ordering them now. And from Japan, they are pretty much almost done. So all the big heavy work is pretty much done. All the tunneling, digging, all that. They're laying track and putting down gravel at this point. And that is what I think lured Amazon to Bellevue, is because that infrastructure is already promised and it's already happening. Right? So right next to the transit center, so if you're a Seattle worker, you could easily go to Bellevue. This is important because today, now this was after, now these two buildings were already in motion. After the whole situation with New York And because Seattle kind of is not as friendly, Bellevue, just like Tacoma, Everett, and all these others, are like, yes, please come. Yeah, we know there's going to be some growing pains, but please come. Because they have the infrastructure that's being built there, Amazon said, why not? Now Bellevue will probably have 25,000 employees with Amazon. Just like that. Snap of a finger. Vulcan, which is owned by the late, great Paul Allen, who was a billionaire who started with Microsoft. He got into his own development company. He's built a lot of the buildings in Seattle that Amazon is in. They're building a 3-tower project right there in downtown Bellevue. And guess what you can see? You can see the Expedia building. So you can walk. First off, Bellevue, even though I give it a lot of, I talk about it a little bit, right? But Bellevue is very walkable. Very walkable. It's so walkable and so because it was never intended to be a big city. It's so tiny. The downtown's clustered that you can literally walk to the mall where you have a ton of places to eat. Tons. So they don't need streetcars there technically because it's so walkable. Like literally it's 2 blocks over and up. There's the mall and you have everything you can think of there. You can buy some of the highest brands, as I mentioned, are there in Bellevue. So, and then you can walk back to work pretty quickly. But on top of that, there's buses everywhere. One of the rapid ride lines goes through Bellevue and it connects you all the way, if you want to take bus, all the way to Seattle. So not only do they have a doubling of service where they have light rail and they're going to have buses, they already have buses, which is going to go across we have the longest floating concrete bridge in the world, and we're then going to have the longest floating bridge that has a light rail on it in the world. So we're the first in those 2 areas in order to get from Seattle to Bellevue. So now Vulcan is going to build 3 buildings, and it's going to be called Bellevue Plaza. Once they complete those 3 buildings, which are going to be, and if you look at Bellevue, there's enough space. Some would argue there's more space in Bellevue really to build up than you do in Tacoma. Tacoma's kind of built up a little bit. Bellevue has a lot of smaller buildings because, again, it was a small town. It has a lot of 1- and 2-story buildings still. But those properties are pretty cheap when you compare prices in Seattle. Even though it's Bellevue, they have a lot of room to grow. And just with 3 buildings plus the other 2, they can expand up to 25,000 people. So HQ2 that would have went to New York basically is going to Bellevue, Washington, which is right next door to Seattle. They're not calling it HQ2. They're basically saying, okay, this is where we'll put our 25,000. Have those people who wanted to work for us in New York come here to us or to some of these other sites. But they're adding 25,000. They've already put a cap on the number of people, the square footage that they're going to have in Seattle. 14 million square feet of office space. They put a cap on that, and they're quickly approaching that. That has nothing to do with the rest of the Puget Sound region, because in Bellevue, they're also adding space. The city, or actually the company, is hungry for square footage. It just is. It's hungry for that. So now, it's like I said, it came back home. And so the city of Bellevue is going to be built up to where it's 25,000 employees once they're done. Now, of course, you have to take some of that out. When you think about it, there's already 2,000 that are there. Maybe, when you're counting that, they're probably adding like somewhere in the neighborhood of 23,000, to the city, 23,000 employees or 23,000 jobs. So if that's the formula they're using, instead of saying, hey, there's 25,000, we're going to put them there in Bellevue, they already have 2,000. So that's 23,000 jobs that they're going to add. The other 2,000 could be sprinkled over the rest of the entire existing sites. Don't know. Or it could be that they're adding additional 20. I don't know. I don't know Bellevue's strategy on that, but I do know that they've already inked a lot of deals in Bellevue. And for Vulcan to get involved, and they're one of the big builders for Amazon, here in this area at least, it seems like, because they're not going to just build just to build. It seems like it's a pretty good, solid deal. Now, the question of why not Tacoma, why doesn't Tacoma get an Amazon? One of the reasons I think is because we don't have the infrastructure yet. That's what I think. I think because we don't have, even though we have the Tacoma link, we don't have enough connections to Seattle that are very frequent. I think that can change Amazon's opinion eventually. But all we have is commuter rail. That's it. And I-5. To me, that's part of the problem. A lot of their workers are still going to probably live in Seattle. Even in Bellevue. A lot of them don't want to live in Bellevue or can't afford to live in Bellevue. That might can afford to live in Seattle or whatever the case may be. But having that connectivity is very important to them. I could see eventually Amazon growing out of space up in Bellevue or putting a cap there. Because every city, even though Bellevue is in the same county that Seattle is, it doesn't have the same politicians in the city. And Bellevue is a little bit more business friendly. And I think the combination of many different things is the reason why Bellevue is in a good prime position that it is in right now in terms of Amazon. I think Tacoma is also heading in the right direction too, because it basically put a tax credit for every employee that a company brings in where the people are paid a certain amount of money. The city pays you money. So I think that is something that Amazon is probably looking at pretty heavy too. So right now it's thumbing its nose to Tacoma, but I think eventually you're going to see it trickle down here as well, because there's a lot of space available that the company could easily expand in, a lot of existing buildings. You know, I talked about that. State Farm, the big building downtown, that's empty. The DeVita building will eventually be empty in the next year or so. And both of those buildings can hold at least together 2,000 employees. State Farm held about 800 employees, I believe, if not more, for State Farm. So it could easily expand here if it wanted to. But I think their strategy now is shifted kind of back to this area because they know what they're getting into. And this is what I argued before. They know what they're getting into. I think with the other sites, they know what they're getting into. I do still think this is a big loss for New York because it's not just Amazon that will reconsider. They said they will still expand over their existing sites. They already have a site in New York. I don't know many more jobs they're going to expand in New York, to be honest with you, because they had just gotten such a bad taste in their mouth. It's much easier to go to a city like Nashville that says, please, what can we do for you? We would love to help you. Help us help you, versus saying, we don't want to hear any of this. We don't want to deal with any of that unless you're going to pay for all this other stuff and you don't want any sort of tax break on it. It just doesn't work that way. Anyhow, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Big win for Bellevue. It looks like they're going to be kind of the pseudo HQ2 with this 25,000 employees eventually that will be built up there. It makes a lot of sense. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, I will see you. Take care.